Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Techie Thursday. As I mentioned yesterday on Workspace Wednesday, we're just going to be doing a slightly different thing because there aren't that many admin updates for this month. So what I thought we would cover today is a couple of things, but the main thing is I've been doing a little bit of research into what's called WEEE, which for those who don't know what that means, that's waste of electrical and electronic equipment. And what I did is I used Gemini because obviously Gemini can give you a lot of information about regulations and what's going on in this country, not across Europe. Does anyone have any idea how much electronic waste the UK produces under the electronic waste regulations in 1 year? Anyone take a guess?
Am I allowed to guess? I'm not sure if I'm excluded from this because I know a little bit about this, although I might have different data to what you're specifically referring to, James. But because of wider work I do around access and inclusion around digital devices, I think we throw away about 244 million computing devices a year, most of which could actually be repurposed and reused and have their life extended, I think. Is that the kind of figure you were thinking of, James?
Well, Gemini gave it to me in tonnage.
Oh, tonnage. Okay. Well, it's about 244 million computers. I know that.
Yeah. So tonnage wise, and it's only what's been reported under the regulations, the UK gets through 500,000 tons of electronic waste per year. But that is not, that's only half the story, because in my deep dive research in Gemini, it pointed out that actually the true figure of electronic waste in the UK is about 2 million tons. And the reason that it's 2 million tons is because it's broken out into various categories. So, for example, a very large, there's a percentage of electronic waste that goes into landfill, believe it or not, even though it shouldn't under the regulations. There's a percentage of electronic waste that is shipped overseas, even though that doesn't show in the regulatory reporting. But the vast majority of that waste, about 1 million tons of it, is sitting in cupboards and in drawers. And just to give you an example, I thought this is crazy. There's no way that there's 1 million tons of electronic waste sitting about in drawers and cupboards. And I decided I'd go into the house and I'd give you a little example.
Wow.
These are just sort of like stuff that was old mobile phones that were just sitting around in drawers, in my house, that have, probably usage. And similarly, having worked in a multi-academy trust, I remember taking on schools, and I would be flabbergasted because, and I'm sure at this, you can all relate to this, that you'll come across cupboards that are like full of laptops, just full of laptops or full of old computers that nobody's using, and they just stick them in a cupboard because, number one, they don't want to deal with the regulations of how to dispose of them. And number two, they don't want, they basically don't know what to do with it. So the thing that I wanted to cover first of all in this meeting is, a brilliant way that you can if you've got an old, like Windows, we've recently gone from a Windows 10 to Windows 11, obviously for security reasons and all other reasons, Microsoft. But if you've got lots of Windows 10 laptops and devices, and you don't want to repurpose them as Windows 11, then you can. And I'll show you, I'm just going to share my screen now. And this is something that I have recently done on a personal level.
It's interesting what you're saying there, James. Sorry to interrupt a second as well, about like the scale of devices that are in our cupboards and drawers and things and in our offices and buildings. If you're in education, and of course many of the people part of this session today and listening to this afterwards are in education, they'll likely be aware that there's actually a mandatory requirement now to not only have a climate action plan, but also have somebody leading that work as it relates to things like IT, for example. So this has gone from being something that you do because it's the right thing to do, ethically or morally, or because it's a value or principle, and it's actually gone to more of a formal requirement now. And I know from work that's going on elsewhere across my network that the Department for Education is going to be increasingly looking at repurposing devices and things for good, as they call it. So I think this is going to be a much bigger and high priority topic in the future as well. So yeah, interested in the conversation, James.
Yeah, and like I say, personally, I'll just give you an example of this. My brother, who's recently retired from schools, and he had to give back his, head teacher laptop, obviously, when he retired, and he had an old Windows 10 laptop, and he'd only ever used it for the internet and things like that, but it was taking, literally 20 minutes to turn on, and it was literally not functioning. So what I did is I said to him, if you just use it for the internet, I'll turn it into Chrome OS Flex. And this is what I just want to cover with you today, why you should be using this, because, if you've got those Windows 10 laptops, if you've got those old devices, you can repurpose them. And I flashed his old Windows 10 laptop, and it turned on in seconds, and he signed in, and he couldn't believe it. He said, He said, that's magic. How did you do that? And I said, it's because it's a lightweight.
And just on that important point you're making, James, just to give people some numbers around this from a real example, I was working with one client. It was quite a large client, to be fair. So they had got thousands of endpoint computer devices on their estate. So it wasn't a small organization. But they were quite old computers in many cases. And so as part of the work I was doing, we calculated how long it was taking those computers to boot up. Okay. Now, on average, believe it or not, in most cases, it was around about 7 minutes. And then I went away to HR and I said, what's the average hourly rate for a member of the people who work in this organization? So we just took a general average. So it was a proxy. It wasn't like forensically scientific. It was an average. But anyway, the upshot is that it turned out that in that organization, they were spending £300,000 a year in salaries for people to wait for a computer to start. And compare that to what James has just said, where you could have put Chrome Flex, for example, as James's contention is, onto those old computers, and instead of 7 minutes, they'd be waiting less than 7 seconds. Yep. And that's literally what we're talking about. And when you see the pounds and you actually saw that as money, if you said to the average leader in education, all that money in cash in front of you on the table is literally, you're paying that for people to wait for a computer to start. That's just one specific but sort of important metric, I think, that makes this very real and very tangible, especially in budget constrained times. Sorry, James.
And the other thing to add to that is it's not just sort of like the amount of money that you're wasting on paying people to sit around waiting for a device to turn on. From an educational standpoint, I haven't worked in education. It's getting children started in their education, getting children straight into the lesson on their device. If you're sitting around, and I worked in a behavior school, so if I'd been in an environment where it was taking 10, 12 minutes for the machine to turn on before they could actually do anything, I would have had a riot on my hands. So by using sort of like Chrome OS or Chrome OS Flex, having them literally turn a button on and signing in, they're straight into the lesson. And then it was like a behavior management tool.
Yeah.
But there are other savings as well. So you've got the behavior management tool of them not sitting there getting bored, getting fiddly, and all the rest of it. You've got the savings staff-wise that Jamie's pointed out, but there are, other savings that you've got here as well.
I like that point you were just making there about it just working as well. It reminds me, James, of a former chief executive I used to have who always used to say to me around technology, as far as he was concerned, he said, we just want it to work, don't we?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the point you were just making. But thanks, James.
Yeah, correct. So, these are the cost savings that you get with Chrome OS Flex if you've got these old devices. And I've known schools to actually partner with companies outside of the school. So a lot of sort of like corporate companies will have this sort of like 3-year refresh cycle, and they buy in decent laptops, these big companies, and after 3 years they refresh it. It's called the refresh cycle. And I've known schools to actually partner with these companies because they can donate their old Windows laptops, for example, or MacBooks or whatever, to the school. The company then get a tax advantage from that, and they're actually, and then the school will repurpose those with Chrome OS Flex to turn them into Chromebooks. So there's a cost saving for the school there. So you're not looking at buying new hardware. Chrome OS Flex itself is completely free to download and install. And then we've got other things that we're going to come on to, which is where the software is free. I mean, Chrome OS Flex, it has to be pointed out, is a light version of Chrome OS. But when I say it's a light version, it's sort of like it's not the only main difference between Chrome OS Flex and Chrome OS is that Flex, because it's going on to old Windows devices or old Mac devices, it doesn't have the Play Store. It has the Chrome Store. It just doesn't have the Play Store. But most of the stuff that you might want from the Play Store, you can find an equivalent on the Chrome Store. Sustainability. I mean, this is what the regulations are all about. One of the requirements of the WEEE, the Waste and Electronic and Electrical Equipment, one of the requirements of producers of equipment is that they have to sign up to a PCS, which is a producer compliance system. So they actually have to report how much electronic equipment they're actually making, and the requirements also state that they have to say what they're putting in place in order to make it sustainable. So by reusing the hardware that's sitting in your cupboards, or sitting on a shelf somewhere, and actually turning it into something that's useful, not only are you saving money, but you're also reducing the waste. Because a lot of even the government regulated figures of the 500,000 tons, a lot of that electronic waste, believe it or not, is actually shredded. This is what my Gemini research told me. It's actually shredded. I did further research into mobile phones. Not that we're talking about mobile phones specifically, but any electronic piece of equipment. Each electronic piece of equipment actually holds a certain percentage of precious metal. So you need to look at, if you think there's 1 million tons of stuff sitting there in people's drawers and cupboards, number one, it's the precious metal content, but number two, if you can reuse it, all the better. But because the Flex, like I was saying, the Chrome OS and Chrome OS Flex is the lightweight model of Chrome OS. So Chrome OS in itself is lightweight. Flex is even further light because it doesn't have the Play. So it leads to lower power consumption. So again, you're saving on staff time, you're saving on student time, leading to better behavior management. You're turning devices that could take 10 minutes to turn on in seconds. So and you've also got sort of like you're saving all round basically.
Yeah, just on the savings point, James, as well, and just to give another example from a real world situation on the energy efficiency bullet point on your slide there. Again, this is the sort of thing that always blows my mind when we uncover the forensic data beneath these headlines. So one client I was working with, again, it wasn't small, so it's a relatively large size client with a couple of thousand endpoint computing devices again. But as part of the work we were doing with them, we calculated how much energy, how much kilowatt per hour energy was being used by their IT estate. And then I went to the estates director and I said, what's your bill per year for energy? So what you're paying per kilowatt per hour? And then when we compared and contrasted that with the deployment of a Chrome-based estate, they were saving over £30,000 a year in energy alone due to the lightweight, if you want to call it that, sort of power consumption to do with Chrome devices and Chrome operating systems. It was mind blowing. I was expecting it to be a few thousand, maybe. I wasn't expecting it to be over £30,000, but that was the difference. You might be staggered if you're an organization that has aging computing devices that are sort of desktop or Windows-based machines. You might be very shocked if you calculated the exact cost of the energy running those devices, because they're very energy hungry compared to Chrome. Thanks, James.
And we don't have cheap energy in this country, as we all know.
We don't, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so the Chrome OS Flex is completely free. I'll go into how you actually get Chrome OS Flex in shortly. So to recycle a device into a Chrome OS Flex device, you can do for free. If you want to manage it the same way that you would manage a Chromebook, for example, you would need a CEU, Chrome Education Upgrade license for each of the devices. And it works exactly the same way that it would with a Chromebook. So it would enroll that device, which you flexed, into your domain, and then your policies apply to that device. So it just makes easy management, where if you've had like a fleet of old Windows devices, the management of those, I know from experience, you know, your GPOs and all the rest of it, not very easy. If you've already got policies in place in your Google Admin Console, those policies will apply, but you need the license. Speak to my colleague Chris, and he can help you get the licenses for those, and they will show up in your admin console as managed devices.
Just one small extra point to add in there as well, James, on Flex devices. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Works exactly the same as it would with a Chromebook. When you actually flex up and manage a Flex device with a CEU, if you decide to then move that across to a brand new Chromebook within the first 12 months, you can do that. So if you've got budgeting restraints and you want to put some Flex devices out there until your new financial year, for instance, when you might want to add brand new Chrome devices, you can move that license across, so you're not paying for it twice. So just something to consider as well.
Good point, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, how to deploy. So the first thing you'll need is one of these, a USB stick. And in fact, this is the USB stick that I use to flash my brother's Windows laptop. So you create a USB installer. I'll tell you how to do that shortly. You can either test that installation from the USB or just use it to replace the existing OS. If you're doing if you're using a USB stick, be aware that anything that's on that USB stick will be formatted. So it's not like it's downloading a file to that. It's going to put the OS onto the USB stick. You can also do an optional mass deploy. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do that via using network tools. And then if you've got the CEU licenses, you can then enroll them in the same way that you would a Chromebook into your Google Admin Console for management. These are the minimum requirements that you need on any old device that you've got. So you can see it's fairly open. It's actually, the major requirement is that you've got US boot capability, because you will need that for one of these. So a lot of the times, you know, if it's an old Windows laptop, for example, you may need to go into the BIOS, for example. I'm sure you'd all know how to do that, and change the boot order in the BIOS so that when you turn the machine on and you've got your Chrome OS Flex on here, it boots from the USB and not from the hard drive. And then what it will do is it'll completely wipe the hard drive of the device and install the Chrome OS Flex on there. There's a quick summary of the benefits. It expands your hardware lifespan, it reduces your e-waste, you've got centralized control, and you also get the same automatic updates that a Chromebook would get. with this. So it's not like an alternative to Chromebook. You still get the security updates. Okay, the next section is, here is how you actually do it. So there's a free extension called the Chrome for your Chrome browser. So it has to be on a Chrome browser, and it's like an extension. So what you would do is you would get your USB stick and you would download this the Chromebook recovery utility. The USB stick, as it says, needs to be 8 gigabits or larger. I would recommend, having done this many times, that when you actually go to download it onto your USB, that you do not do it over Wi-Fi. You do it over a wired connection, because with Wi-Fi you may run into difficulties. Even if you've got a super fast Wi-Fi connection, always do it over a wired connection. It'll ask you the media, so you select the USB stick, and then it will ask you for the manufacturer of your Chromebook. And at that point, you select Google as the manufacturer of your Chromebook, and then it will give you the option for Chrome OS Flex. And then you select it. It takes about 15 minutes to format this, put the OS on there, and then as long as you've done the necessary steps for the BIOS and things like that, turn the machine off, plug your USB stick in, and hey-ho, you've now got a Chrome OS Flex device from an old thing that was sitting in your cupboard. What's not to like? And that is the end of that section. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd be interested if anybody's got any particular points of clarification or questions. I suppose for us at C Learning, we've had a long history working with thousands of organizations with Chrome and Chrome Flex. We've touched on a number of points there, James, and great presentation. Thank you for going through that with such clarity. In terms of, there's lots we could have said about Chrome and Chrome Flex, but I think the points you've shared there are some of the most powerful and compelling around sustainability plus budgets, and also transforming the user experience at the end of the day. Because if I go back to my former chief executive, who used to drill it into all of his directors that when it comes to technology, we just want it to work and do what we want it to do. I think that's probably ultimately what we all want from technology. I know I certainly do. But also, many of us on this call are responsible for budgets of different sizes. And unless anybody wants to tell me differently, I'm guessing most people are experiencing budget constraints and increasing constraints, if I can put it that way. And that's why we spent a little bit of time today stressing the budget aspects of Chrome and Chrome Flex, because although many people on this call might already be aware of it, there's many people who will be watching this afterwards who won't be. And certainly amongst all of the customers that I work with, Chrome and Chrome Flex have enabled their budgets to go dramatically further. I mean, the general accepted kind of measure, if you like, which is anecdotal but pretty correct actually in terms of accuracy, is that when it comes to devices, if you were buying a Chrome device as opposed to a Windows type machine, you're looking at about your budget going about 2.5 to 3.5 times further, depending on what spec machines, of course. But if you're talking about Chrome Flex, oh my gosh, that is such a game changer with budgets, because for the nominal cost of a Chrome upgrade license to manage it, which is less than £30 or whatever, Chris will correct me if I'm wrong about that. I did some calculations for one very large organization again, who are looking to replace all their fleet of devices. And I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look, but it was something like £2.5 million to buy the devices, as opposed to Chrome Flex, which came out at about £35,000 or something, for, you know, a bit of a difference. And they couldn't believe it. And it was like, no, that's seriously, that's the difference. And, you know, it's like all solutions, isn't it? It's not perfect. There's lots of things that, you know, may not align perfectly depending on what it is you want to do with your device strategy, but it's an absolute game changer. Chris, I know you deal with an awful lot of our customers, but like, have you got anything you'd add to that in terms of feedback you've had from customers?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and they are points that have probably been covered already, but worth just emphasising some of those again. We work with a large organisation in the Midlands that does adult learning, and when we move them across to Chrome, they aren't in a particularly well-off area, let's just say, quite a deprived area. So before that, the lady who was actually running the sessions would go in an hour before she was due to teach and turn all the Windows machines on in the hope, and it was always fingers crossed, that they would actually be ready to run in time for the lesson. With these, like you say, 10 devices, fully managed at £26 for a Chrome Education upgrade license, 260 quid for 10 devices. That's probably one fairly poor Windows machine. Budgetary perspective, it was an absolute game changer for her. I think the other thing as well is you're giving the opportunity for students who may not have the ability to own their own device to have a device that they can take home with them and work, something that they've probably not had the opportunity to do for various financial restraints. So I don't understand why people wouldn't at least consider rolling out some Flex devices. I mean, Stuart's got his hand up. Come in, my friend. Come in.
Hello. We've got about 3,000 Chromebooks at the moment, and what usually goes wrong with them is a hardware failure. I had a particular problem with the HP G5s. The battery used to bulge underneath the keyboard, therefore pushing the keyboard up, and trackpad didn't work and the keyboard didn't work. So I had a pretty bad time in terms of experience with Chromebooks from a HP's perspective. We're trying different brands now just to see if we can get past that problem. But staff prefer a Windows device. Staff don't. We give staff Chromebooks in the beginning. Couldn't get on with them. Couldn't do everything they needed to do. Probably because we've got a mixture of thick apps and things like that, which are required, for business sort of critical software that certain people have to use. And I understand that there's not really a way around that at the moment until everything goes web-based. We're gonna have to stick with them. But we've got about 3,000 Chromebooks, about 700 staff laptops now, and the main problem we're having with staff laptops is the batteries. The batteries are dying, so I don't know whether the Chrome Flex would give us any better battery life if we were to replace the batteries.
Really interesting question, and I don't want to misquote the research in case I'm wrong, but I have a feeling I saw some research on this somewhere, and that it does extend the battery life due to it being less intensive on the battery. But I'd have to go and check that. I'd have to check on it in case I'm wrong. But yeah, it's an interesting point. And of course, you've got a huge estate, Stuart, with a lot of complexity to manage as well.
My other question really is, we're building a new campus which is going to be ready in 2029, and there's been everybody's leaning towards going for Chromebooks instead of desktop PCs. My concern is we're basically bringing 3 campuses into one, so there's going to be much more students on a campus. The rooms are going to be utilized a lot more. At the moment, we've got trolleys of say 20 Chromebooks in different classrooms, etc., across the 3 campuses as they exist. But the rooms aren't utilized 7 hours a day, for instance. So therefore you get a charge window. With the emphasis on using Chrome on a new campus where the room is going to be used for those 7 hours significantly reduces my charge window for a device. Are there devices around that will... I got two problems here. Are there devices around that would, satisfy the 7 hours? And then the reliance then really is on the person in charge of the room to put the devices on charge at the end of the day. So they're ready for the next day. But if they don't, it jeopardizes the next day's teaching.
100%. I've just come out of a board meeting this morning, Stuart, with my multi-academy trust, where we were getting an update on the device and digital strategy around the organization, because we've deployed quite a lot of Chromebooks, for example. Now, what's working well there is we put a lot of work into the deployment strategy and training and support, and also protocols to make sure that there was the right charging stations available, that everyone knew it was their responsibility to do certain things, because that's a management issue. It's not a tech issue. So there's like a cultural aspect to that. But I think from a user experience point of view, and again, it's down to models and all that kind of thing. And I couldn't tell you the exact model of the Chromebook I've got, and it is quite a new one. So it certainly wasn't the cheapest Chromebook, but it's a very good one that I'm using. It's my model that I happen to be on at the moment is an Asus, but I've got several different models of Chromebooks here. But I'm on an Asus at the moment. Now, this battery lasts a day and a half. And that's me using it all day. And I'm in video calls all day. I've got 8 hours of video calls today, including this one. And my Chromebook will last me till tomorrow lunchtime if I didn't charge it at all. Now, I have had others that wouldn't last me the day. So I think it's about the right device. And certainly our team, I mean, our expert isn't on this particular session for who could give you the exact models of what's going to last the longest. And I think if you pay a little bit more, because mine wasn't dramatically expensive, but if you pay a little bit more, then it will last a bit longer.
We're sort of doing an exercise at the moment. Would it be more cost effective to give every learner that's coming to that campus a Chromebook rather than have stacks of Chromebooks in rooms?
Yeah, that's a detailed piece of work to be done and to think about, and there's no standardized way of looking at those kind of challenges. Some people have taken one approach and another. My trust has got, like I say, banks of charging trolleys, but a particular protocol around how those are managed as well. But certainly Chrome, we did a big research exercise actually in my trust, which is quite a large trust, about what devices people would like, and we did a very scientific testing process over a year with hundreds and thousands of kids involved and thousands of staff. And the conclusion was that they opted for Chromebooks in the end, because whilst there's no perfect technology in this world, there was a number of key factors. Sustainability, which James has talked about, which is a big one for my trust anyway. There was budgets, of course, the reality of budgets, but there was also fundamentally the learning, the user experience from both a teaching and learning point of view, from the learning point of view of the students who just wanted to lift the lid and the device just work. And the teachers basically wanted the same. If you give the example, we've had some points made already about the kind of pain that teachers experience. So those were kind of the things that won out. But when the students had tested them, I mean, it wasn't even close. Their feedback was unanimously for Chrome. But the point I want people to be aware of as well is that we've got hundreds of clients who have primarily Microsoft technologies in their organizations, but they're using Chrome and Chromebooks as well. And I think a lot of people still don't realize that fully. I think they sort of think it's a binary choice, like, oh, we don't have Google everywhere, so why would we have Chromebooks? Well, you could take a college like, I think it's Warsaw College is one that's like primarily Microsoft, because one of my friends is one of the bosses there. But they've got Chromebooks everywhere because they've saved a load of money. But one of the key things we haven't really delved into in too much detail in this conversation yet, and I'm conscious of time because we'll stop this particular recording shortly, but security. I actually found my way to Chrome back in 2013 when I was running a large college, completely Microsoft college at the time, and I had a major cybersecurity incident, and I got contagion through my network, and it nearly got to the keys to the worst things possibly, if you know what I mean. And I managed to just about stop it, and there was a huge investigation I had to do. And then one of my engineers came along and said, well, this wouldn't have happened with Chrome. And I thought it looked too good to be true. So I was like, well, that can't be right, when they were telling me there was no cases of ransomware in a Chrome operating system and stuff. I'm like, well, that can't be right. And it turned out it was right. And when I looked into it, once I moved that estate entirely to Chrome, not every cybersecurity problem, obviously, because there's always somebody causing mischief, but pretty much most of my headaches with cybersecurity went away because of how secure Chrome is. So it's not for everyone, because of course, if you've got some very CPU intensive activity to do or something like that, probably not the right system for you. But for most users, not general users, for general learning, like the classes I was looking at earlier today, for example, I was in a meeting, all of those done beautifully through the Chrome operating system. So security, I think, is a big one. James, I know you do a lot of technical work around this, but you do a lot of advisory work as well for clients around how to optimize security. I'm assuming you would agree with the security side of things around Chrome.
100%. I mean, the whole thing about Chrome OS is that it works in sort of like a sandbox environment, effectively. So, if you're running Chrome OS, a Chromebook or a Chrome OS Flex device has never been hacked, has never had ransomware, has never been taken over. It's simply the way it's designed, by Google to make it secure. So
yeah, they offer a prize, actually, don't they, for anyone who can do that?
Yeah, they do.
Which has never been claimed, I believe. Nobody's ever managed to claim it, I believe.
They've never managed to claim it, and you know, in all of my years in IT, you know, I even had a school, I remember calling me one summer holiday, it was a head teacher called me and said, "Oh, we've got terrible problems. We can't access our computers." It's kind of like, "Have you got a problem with your Google devices?" "Oh, no, we can access Google. It's our..." Anyway, cut a long story short, turns out it was their Microsoft that someone had left on a RDP public connection to their server that infected all of their Windows devices. Which wouldn't have happened with Chrome
Yeah,
OS.
I mean, I think the point is everybody on this call is probably painfully aware. The whole cybersecurity agenda just gets more and more complicated, and with more and more mischief makers. And of course, AI is also introducing new threat vectors when it comes to cybersecurity. Maybe we do a whole separate session on cybersecurity, James. But I'm mindful of time, and I know you want to get onto the techie updates as well on some wider matters. But if we stop this particular recording for this part of the meeting, and then we start another one for the second part of the meeting, that would be ideal. And thanks for everybody's questions. Thanks, Stuart. You do great work over there in your organization, Stuart. Always love visiting your place. So absolutely brilliant college for anybody who hasn't maybe hasn't been there. I recommend a visit. But and if anybody has any wider questions after this, or they're watching this recording later, just reach out to the C-Learning team and we'll happily help out with any advice and guidance and support. But thanks, James, for taking us through that.
So we're going to stop the recording.